Hi, I'm Emmy Bright, and I'm here today to share my book and deck called More Stupids with you guys. So you can read this like a book with the images, or you can do tarot-like readings using the cards, or you can bring them both together, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about doing today. So this deck and book started with the artwork. I'm an artist and I work in print, writing, and performance, and I thought I'd show you some of my work. For a while I was doing a practice called Three Stupids, where each day I came into the studio and I had to do something stupid or wrong or bad in the studio. The way I know they're good is if they're both right and wrong at the same time. The Venn diagram suggests that you can't have both not me and me, and yet if you look at Winnicott's ideas of attachment theory, there's this idea that the bond between the self and the other, even in love, we have some of this same confusion about where me begins and you ends and where you begin and I end. So this diagram, while being wrong, also has a quality of rightness to it. Here's another one. This one doesn't have text, but its title is really important. It's called The Thing and Its Absence. So this one came about by accident while screen printing. I had this background. The blob was supposed to go right on the white part, but when it ended up offset like this, there's something very funny to me about the line, the thing and its absence. We think about the presence of objects and the presence of things, but sometimes lack or things missing take up just as much space as the things which are in our lives. So this is about the presence of absence. So when I'm making art, one of my favorite parts is I often just print or draw a bunch of sort of blob shapes in different colors, and then, or in different orientations on the page, and then have sort of strips of text either on Post-its or tape kind of floating around. And then my favorite part is trying to find these apt combinations where, something electric happens between the text and the image. So, this blob, and I found the text, "Why don't you want this?" because I was very frustrated with something a curator was saying at one point. But those ended up pairing together to be a work on their own. And so this work evolved with not just pairing text with image, but beginning to pair some of my short stories and autobiographical writing and quotes that I'm always collecting, trying to pair those with various images to try to find another combination that had some, electric feeling or had some resonance that wasn't otherwise there. When I was a kid, my dad would wake me up by raising the window shade a few inches. This was just enough to let light through a small, faceted crystal, and rainbows would dance around my otherwise dark room. This small, everyday magic. This crystal has hung in windows of 4 different apartments in Chicago, another one in Somerville, another at a boarding school in upstate New York, one in Providence, one in Pontiac, Michigan, and soon I will hang it up in Detroit. When we were quite small, my friend C and I liked to jump off the garage roof. We would climb up the fence, onto the roof, and creep to the edge. Then we'd throw ourselves off sideways, plummet through the air for a second, and land hard on our sides. The wind would get knocked out of us, and we'd lie on our backs until we found breath again. The bed of ferns always appeared more substantial than it was. After catching our breath, we would scamper back up to do it again. At one point, one of our moms looked out the window during their tea and saw our small bodies hurtling down through the air to the ground. They both came running outside yelling, and we were both very surprised at how angry they were. I had a studio visit with Catherine Lord. She told me, "Narrative is hard, especially if you can't tell your own." I wanted to cry into her academic dyke, crisp white shirt. My nickname growing up was Pippi because she was the strongest girl in the world. And the first hairstyle I ever really wanted was Pippi's 2 long braids which stuck straight out from her head. After many years of tomboying, I let my bowl cut grow out, and by high school I had the 2 long braids and an undercut shaved halfway up my head. After high school, it was more confusing. I would seek out hair cutters and dress up in my most me outfit so that they would just know how to cut my hair. I chose hair cutters who would correctly decide haircuts for me without me having to talk about gender or bring pictures. And I remember feeling pretty lost when they moved to other cities, or I did. The first woman I dated seriously would cut my hair for me. She gave me these meticulous fades and razored along lines along the side of my flop on top. I would shave her undercut and trim her mop of curls. Coming into my queerness had these benefits that I hadn't expected. When we broke up, I didn't know what to do with myself or my hair. I went to supercuts, figuring they could just make it shorter and I could re-find the haircuts she had given me. They did make it shorter, but used clippers and lost what she had made. In the car, I panicked and sought a friend's opinion. She did not think I looked like a Nazi cop. Still, I went back to supercuts and had my head shaved all the way down. It was tidy and comforting to the touch, velvety like a pit bull's nose. Other people wanted to pet my newly mown head too, and I welcomed this touch. When I am sad in an unshakable way, I go to the city pound and look for big fluffy dogs. When I find a big dog, we look deep into each other's eyes. Sometimes mine fill with tears, and I pet the beast through the bars for a while, but it doesn't go much further. I've been doing this for 7 years now, so I no longer believe that I am looking for a pet. From Claudia Rankine's Don't Let Me Be Lonely. Understand without effort that man is left at times thinking as if trying to weep. I am somewhat rephrasing the poet Cesar Vallejo here, because Vallejo comes closest to explaining that any kind of knowledge can be a prescription against despair. One of my favorite places to cry is underwater at the YMCA. Most of my good ideas come from underwater, and here, being bumped by soft men especially bothers me. I took a workshop on clown. Towards the end of the class, when it came time to perform, I set out to tell the story of the emperor's new clothes, while jumping rope with a yellow ribbon. I tripped myself and nearly fell. I swung the ribbon around, but had no momentum. I could not jump and tell, I could not tell and jump, so I was immediately out of breath, exhausted, but still trying and failing and tripping. Wrong words started coming into my head, interrupting my telling and jumping. And when the teacher told me to stop and finish the story, I looked up and said, and everyone could see, he was not wearing anything at all. There was nothing left of me, and the people watching were horrified. And in that broken place, it occurred to me that I could be an artist. When I was 27, I lived alone for the first time. The apartment was on the 2nd floor and had a vintage farmhouse sink and painted wooden floor, and because it was cute, I thought everything was going to be okay. I needed it to be okay. I had just quit my job, left my partner of 9 years, and moved into this new place. It occurred to me one day that no one would notice if I fell and lay bleeding out on the floor. No one would happen upon me. The world's mouth opened. So that's one way you can enjoy this set, is just, read this like a book, look at the images, you can read it before bed or whatever. All right, so when you're doing a spread for others in the book, there's a few possibilities, but honestly, any spread that works for regular tarot should work for this. There's these diagrams of different spreads you can use, and so if you need to refer to that, you can, but I'm just going to show you a 3-card spread and how you could do that for someone else. The 3-card spread is a past, present, future spread, and that's most useful for questions that people have about a sphere of their life. So maybe they're worrying about something in their career, their love life generally, creative practice, family. Actually, a reading I gave recently, someone came and he was asking me about his career. I like to begin with just spreading the cards out like this. Then you just say, I'm dragging my fingers across. Tell me to stop when I hit the right card for you. And they, at some point, will say stop. And then you pull that card out. You don't flip it over. You just set it aside. And then the next selection I do with cutting the cards. So just cut the cards like this. And you say, just stop me when it feels like your card is here. And at some point, they'll stop you, and then you make that, present. And then I like to sweep it the other way, like this. So if you're doing it over FaceTime or something, you would touch the cards and they would tell you when to stop. But ideally, you would let them touch the cards and with their eyes closed. So like this, it's like, oh, stop when your card feels right. And then it has a different kind of intentionality to it. So then you have, I always try to do it from the person's view. So this is present, this is past, and this is future. And I always start with the present. And because I just did a reading yesterday, I thought I'd show you that reading that we did and sort of talk you through it. This person was asking me about their career and just said that was the area they wanted to work on. So I always like to start with the present because that's where we are. It feels like it makes a lot of sense. So, ta-da! We found if only. I told him, like, well, I think about longing. I think about a kind of wistfulness or wishfulness, a certain heaviness around whatever's going on in your career right now. And then I say, like, hey, does any of that resonate with you or feel right? And he chimed in that, like, yes, he's working at a museum. He's an artist. He's a couple years out of school and trying to learn more about being an artist, but just wishes he was at a point where he could make all of his money from making his artwork. And I was like, okay, well, that makes sense. And he's like, yeah, I'm sort of dreaming towards that, but I just don't know if it'll ever come. And so then I said, well, let's go to the past and see what the past can offer you. So the card for the past was this, and this card I told him is called Sad Gay. And I said, this can be like something to watch out for, a lesson that you've learned in the past, or it could describe something that's happened to you in the past or a way that you've been in the past. And I said, I could also see this meaning two different things. Like there's these raindrops or tears over a rainbow, and you could see either, raindrops really do make a rainbow happen. So, maybe it's, something good coming out of something bad. And I was like, but the other thing I could see is, it's called Sad Gay. It could be about, queer negativity, melancholia, and depression. And he started laughing. He's like, absolutely the second is me. So we flipped over this card. This one is called Wishes Horses, and it comes from the saying, if wishes were horses, then beggars would ride. And so for this one, I actually turned to the book, and you could do this too. If you're lost for a reading, you can just reference the story in the book. Let me see where this one is. There it is. So it's like right here, and there's a nice, if you're looking for it, there's a nice index here with all the numbers for the stories and the grid of images so you can find them. So I read him this. I said, if wishes were horses, then beggars would ride. My mom on desire. Other people also say this. They are mostly Southern folks, I think, like my mom. As a child, I was always taken back when they'd say it. why were we suddenly talking about beggars? And why were we also suddenly talking about horses? I really did wish for a horse more than anything in the world. Despite my confusion around the saying itself, the core message was always clear. So I read that to him, and he laughed, and I said, oh, have you heard that saying? And he had. And I said, it's like, so when I think about this with, you're working in this museum, you're frustrated that you're not making your art yet, you want to move to somewhere else. You used to be making, more sad, melancholic queer art or art about your queerness. Now you're making stuff that's more joyful. And I said, well, what I think of with this card, which is about, wishing for something you don't have, I think this is giving you the lesson of wishing is not enough. And wishing is not enough, and what sort of moves can you make towards putting your creative practice or more to the center, or making your creative community stronger. And I was like, this could be something as simple as making sure you rent a studio. This could be something like curating a show for your friends, and then maybe they will curate you into a show. This could be something like putting in your schedule art making as much as you do going to the gym or going to the museum. So after explaining each card individually to whoever you're doing the reading for, then your job is to make a narrative that has to do with what they were talking about from these 3 cards. And so I went back for him and said, okay, so in college you were doing this work around your queerness that was sort of steeped in heavy melancholy. And that has transitioned to being more joyful. And I think we see some of that in these bright colors throughout. Now you're working at a museum. You are putting in the work. You're learning about the field. You're seeing how people talk about work, who's allowed to talk about work, who's not allowed. You're learning all of these skills with installation. But you're not finding as much time or space or remuneration from your practice. And your goal is to be an artist making their living off their work. But I'll tell you, and I said this also because, I know he's right out of college, and I'm not sure how many people are saying this to him. Most artists work. Most people have a side hustle or are teaching or are doing install work, and that is absolutely a legit way to be an artist. But maybe what the future card is really telling you is how can you invest in your practice in a tangible way rather than a wishful way? What are some real moves that you can make for yourself and for your art to grow stronger and be thriving? I think a lot of so he really appreciated that. He really appreciated it, and I could tell because I was looking at him and he was talking to me as I was doing it. So these readings are not one-sided. They really are a dialogue. With doing that kind of reading, let's say you pulled a card and like this one, and you've found yourself stuck and you're like, I don't know, it's pink. Why don't you want this? One thing you can do is just reference the book. You can use these stories in the book as a way to springboard for your own stories and your own imagination. So slowly over time, the meanings for these cards will have stories associated with your life and the way you've experienced the world and the way you've experienced being a person in it. Thanks for checking out this demo, and I'll put this set away. And just a reminder, this is available from Printed Matter or your favorite indie bookstore. You can also order it from 3 Hole Press. Thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.